It's
Yep.
Marc Sims again, just asking a few questions. Just a few questions. Brian Mullins is back on the line. Brian Mullins is the political director of Citizens for Civic Education. Did I get that right, Brian?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
But we were talking earlier, and and what we actually talking about, we talking about this and that, but it's really the divvying up or the cut up or the parsing of resources. You got
Right.
black folks, you got Mexicans, different Latinos, you got the different Irish, different white ethnics here, and we all kind of fight over the crumbs or over the big money too. You were talking
Sure.
about the
Sure.
Mexican population, and not to say anything bad about the Latinos or Mexicans. I'm not saying
Sure.
anything bad,
Sure.
but they get their fair share of the pie as opposed to black folks. Am I wrong?
No, you're 100% right. And it is, and I tell people all the time, it's not a disrespect or a dislike on the humanity stage, but it's a reality that we live in. The way I discuss it, our house is burning down to the ground. I don't have time or energy to give you any water. I don't have any water right now for you. So, I can't be concerned with the immigration issues and things because it ultimately hurts our communities. Give you an example.
You're talking about the black community, Negro community, African American community. That's what you're saying. For those who don't know,
Correct. And
those who
I even
don't know
break it down.
Chicago.
Yeah, Mark, I'll even break it down even more. I'm part of this ADOS movement, right? American Descendant of Slavery, where we even chop up that designation to a smaller subset of American descendants of slaves. Basically, anybody who was here prior to 1965 and the Immigration and Naturalization Act that brought black immigrants to the United States on top of it. And the reason that's all relevant in today's world, especially when you talk about, we'll throw in a whole nother controversial topic, LGBTQ community, right? It's about resources. So give you an example on procurement. Hiring falls under the same thing, but give you an example about procurement. In Illinois and Chicago, you have a standard that says 25% of all procurement contracts go to minorities. Minorities is the word, right? Under that 25%, 52% of those contracts go to white women who they put under the minority category. Minority means anybody other than white males, right? Now you go and keep breaking that down. Hispanics get a chunk. Black, as we know it, African American is in Chicago, we're at 3%. 1, 2, 3, right? But check this out. Give you an example on construction. Two of the largest construction contractors in Chicago, you have Ujama Construction and you have Boa Construction. But guess what? They're Nigerian, right? So they came in and they didn't even live in Chicago. They didn't even grow up here. So even though they're U.S. citizens, they came in second generation Nigerians. They get the contracts that are set aside for African American. But guess what they do? They live in places in white suburbs, and they hire white and Hispanic workforce, but they're getting the credit for it, right? And so I think these type of conversations are very important. Going back to education, we talk about one of the things that we're fighting for is class size, overcrowded classrooms. Black classrooms are not overcrowded. White and Hispanic classrooms are overcrowded. So you got this mass immigration movement inside of Chicago, sanctuary cities. We got Chewy Garcias of the world, who's a congressman. You got all these massive movements of immigrants. Rahm Emanuel, don't forget, ushered in 50. His goal, and I don't know if he might have made it, 50,000 Puerto Ricans from the island of Puerto Rico into Chicago when they had the hurricane here. Now, they didn't do that because Rahm Emanuel, who's a former mayor, cared about Puerto Ricans. He saw a voter block. They're moving voters around. So when Donald Trump was talking about let's go ahead and put your citizenship on the census, I was all for it. You know why? In Chicago, we have 180,000 illegal immigrants. 180,000. That is a large population of people, right? And what's going to happen is the census is coming in. They're going to be counted on the census in 2020. And guess what happens in 2021? You remap the electoral districts, right? So now they're going to shift their populations, and we're going to lose electoral districts. The word on the street is we'll probably lose one traditionally black congressional district, 2 black wards within the Chicago, and multiple black state rep and state senate districts, 2 Hispanic populations, right? And it just behooves me that black people, we all on board with it. Brian, you're just racist. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm looking at the deviation like you said. It's about the resources and the resources that come to our communities, our children for the future, right? If we keep fighting for other people and not for our own kids, I mean, we're going to be wiped out of the city of Chicago, which, by the way, is the goal, right? We watching a tremendous urban renewal take place where you're just shifting of populations. I had a conversation, I think it was on Chicago Tonight, when we were talking about, one of the asks from the teachers union is for housing, and they come out and they talk about affordable housing, right? What they're asking for, though, when you get the fine print, they want teachers to get no interest and free grants for housing. So the police department and the firemen, the city gives them like $15,000 grants if they want to buy housing in the city, right, to live in housing. Well, my argument was, with the teacher population being 80% white and Hispanic, why would – and the only vacant housing in Chicago is on the south and the west side of Chicago, which are primarily black and vacant, right, because they've ravaged our communities through foreclosures and tax sales and things like that. Why would we participate in giving whites and Hispanics vouchers to move and gentrify our own communities? It's an insanity that we keep playing into, and we're trying to move this narrative through citizen-civic education. I'm working with a group called the Black Community Collaborative, which was formed around this education issue to be the voice of black parents and the black community as far as it comes with education, about education. Give you example why that's important. The teachers union, who's on strike here in Chicago, they fund 27 organizations to engage parents and engage the community in education. Mark, how do you think would be black out of that 27?
Probably about two.
Chicago,
probably
right?
about two of them.
Right, exactly. Well, there you go. And it's two. It is two.
Yeah, I said about two. I'm just guessing about two.
Right, 2 out of 27.
Right.
And those, they don't go outside of the Bronzeville, Kenwood, Oakland area, which is a small area within Chicago, right? And that is where it's been gentrified or it's probably I'm assuming the most economically viable black community. That's it. So they spend millions of dollars to engage white and Hispanic parents, and then they turn around and point fingers at us and say, well, your parents, you black parents, need to engage more and care about your kids. I'm like, yeah, but you gave them millions of dollars to do that. And you looking at us like the group of people who have experienced the most trauma and poverty and stuff against us historically, forever, right, since our inception. You just expect us to just do it. But everybody else gets paid for it and funds and money's put into their communities to thrive, and then you turn around and blame us for being poor. We're at the end of the day and uninformed, right? And I think, man, all of this comes back to we have to take control of our own black communities. We have to rebuild our communities like we went through war. We have been war. We've been ravaged. We've been war on drugs, war on education, lack of access to capital for business. We are cut out of the labor market here in Chicago for sustainable wages. We have to rebuild our whole community pretty much from scratch, rebuild the vacant housing, which would then cause us to go ahead and move into the education sector and try to keep what's left of the Great Migration here in Chicago.
Well, let me let you end this we only got a few more minutes in the podcast.
Sure.
But let me tell the people who listen a dirty little secret about Negroes, and some may know this. We were, colored, black, African Americans. What were we? Something else. We just the confused people. We're still arguing about, and in subtle ways, we're still arguing about who's black. You ain't black enough. You ain't black like me. Right. And this is why we have more problems than the other ethnic groups in Chicago and across the nation. Right. So when we gonna stop this? Who's black and are you blacker than me? And this tribalism we have in the black community that holds us back. Yeah, the racism, discrimination. Everybody's fighting for the pie here, but we still fighting over who's black and who's black enough, and all this kind of craziness. The tribalism. When is it gonna stop? How we gonna stop it?
Well, if I had that answer, Mark, I would be further along. But I'm gonna say this. I think it's almost we look at it a little bit backwards, right? People always come at me like when I mention ADOS, right? Brian, you're being divisive. The people who say that we are divisive, or people that bring up this true tribalism which takes place in our community, they're the ones with the resources. So they don't want to lose the resources. So I sit back and I try to work with people who have resources, and they're traditionally the one, they're trying to protect their own, right, which is born and bred in white supremacy, right? They have the resources. They are the ones I call the gatekeepers. They don't want us in. It's not like we don't want their assistance. I would love for the gatekeeper community to sit back and say, you know what, we're going to fund and fight for the masses of black community. So for me, to answer that question, I don't really know how it's going to happen, but I think it's up to them to come back black at the end of the day.
You're talking about the black gatekeepers here in Chicago.
Yeah.
And that's the big that's our biggest problem, right?
Yeah.
The black gatekeepers.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And it's probably nationwide. I'm sure every single city has gatekeepers in it. Those are the ones that usually in the cities the Democratic Party has blessed with jobs and contracts and social service contracts, and they're the ones that go to the galas and they stand up behind the mayors while our communities are being crushed, and they are the ones that are put in positions like well, let me give you an example. Let me end with this here. So we talking about education, right? So in Chicago, we have a black woman mayor. We have a black woman head CEO of public schools, a black deputy mayor of equity. We have a black chief education officer, and 43% of principals in CPS schools are black women, right? So who do we eventually blame for the fail of black education? The lack of black teachers in black schools, the lack of black male teachers in these schools. Those are the gatekeepers to me, right? And they need to sit back and say, you know what, because they could. If they decided we're going to fix black education in Chicago, there's not one person in their way to do it, right? So that's why I blame the gatekeeper class, right? They have the ability to come back and help the larger masses of black people, but for some reason they don't. It's probably because at the end, and I know how it is, at the end of the day, the white money is at the top of it, controlling all the tentacles, right? And so they are doing the bidding of white supremacy without them having to set foot in our communities or even be seen. But they are the results. We got a black police chief while we have the highest amount of crime and shootings and murders ever, right? So we got to step back, and those are the gatekeeper class. They all run together. They hang together. They go to the same galas, and they talk about us like we are the problem at the end of the day, even though we are created a socioeconomic group of people. So,
Brian, when can I have you back?
Anytime, man. Anytime. This is what I do. So whatever you want, give me a call, brother. I appreciate it.
Brian Mullins, it's been a pleasure. I'll see you on the social media. Appreciate it.
All right.